everybody else that's been out here who's been dedicated to maintain Occupy St. Louis. Let's give everybody, those who've been here to maintain Occupy St. Louis deserve a well-deserved round of applause. I'm here to deal with a sensitive issue, but it's a real issue. And that is, Kathy was mentioning the racial oppression of St. Louis. I'm taking it further than that throughout this country, as well as throughout the world. It's an issue of the 21st century, and I'm down here to challenge you, the future leaders, that is an issue that has to be paramount, and that as the future leaders seizing power, because in order to deal with the issues that I believe that need to be dealt with, we have to have a redirection of those who control the power here in this city, in this state, and in this country. Does that make sense? Because no matter how many times we be protesting out here, and our rights are, our demands are righteous, it don't mean a hill of beans until we are sufficiently organized to be able to control the decisions that impact our lives. I hope that makes sense. So to that end, in terms of the racial oppression of black people, all you got to do, first of all, statistically, analyze all the kinds of statistics that are available, and it will prove out that even though there is a person of color that holds the highest office in this country, racism and the oppression of black people is endemic here in this society and need to be addressed. Let me give you some classic examples. And many of our examples also are cited in a variety of newspapers that we have published over the years, including one that pointed out statistically here in this country, when you look at the prisons, which we call a prison industrial industry, that black males in this society are 6% at birth. Yet, if you look at all the jails in this country, black people fill up the jails, black males, 60, 70, 80%. Not just here in the city of St. Louis, but again, all across this country. When you look at another clear example nationally of racism and oppression, all we got to do is look at the drug laws of this society, which now I understand there's a legislation or executive order coming from Obama trying to reduce the disparity of sentencing for two drugs that of a whole lot of usage here in this country. Which then, why are so many people drugged out too? We haven't looked at that as an issue. Because of, again, that's a reflection of the ongoing oppression that people, both black and white, feel, but there's a greater intensity, I would like to feel and say, in our community, because again, we are disproportionately impacted. But going back to that law, crack, which is a drug use that has already been known to be a poor man's drug, used many times in the black community. But if you have a possession of crack compared to the possession of powdered cocaine, which has been proven statistically is the drug use basically of white America, that you will see in the sentencing that even for a small quantity of crack versus a large, if a person is caught with a large quantity, the sentencing for the person with the least in terms of crack is greater. Therefore, this so-called drug war, in my humble opinion, was designed as a tool for racial oppression to target the black community at a high level, and with the incarceration that I just spoke to being an effect of a policy that's based on racism. That's one example. But then let me give you another example just coming right here inside of the city of St. Louis, and that's all throughout many municipal communities. If we look at those who protect and serve us, the St. Louis Police Department, Our organization says that if this is a fair society, a society, quote unquote, of democracy and equal treatment of all people, then all up and down this society we ought to be having a reflection of proportionate sharing of power as well as jobs. If you look at the St. Louis Police Department, in the city of St. Louis, they say it's 50% black or 54%. Yet, if you look at the police department, it's 70% white, 30% black. A clear example of racial oppression, because by the denial of our proportionate share, it takes away two things. One, jobs in our community, because police officers are paid a salary, and then it also many times brings in people who are not nowhere near culturally attuned to our community. And that's why, if you study the history of America in terms of black people rebelling, and they call it riots, every rebellion that has occurred in this country, with the exception of Dr. King, which was probably a police assassination anyway, started with some incident of police violence. So if we're dealing with racial oppression as a new society, that has to be an issue that needs to be dealt with. Let me give you another on economics. They say generally the population of unemployment is 9% in this country. Yet black people are unemployed in the general masses double that of that number at 20% or 18%. But if you look at also black youth between the ages of 18 and 35, it's at a rampant 40%. And so therefore that has the other effect in our community that kicks our behinds, because those same brothers who are unemployed unconsciously and unwittingly becomes prayers or like vampires against our own communities by sticking us up and robbing and burglarizing and doing all those other kind of crazy things that happen in our community, including one another, shooting one another. So that's another example of racism. The racism is, in America, there's a statistic I challenge everybody to do your due diligence, that going back to racial, in terms of policing, how many of you ever heard of DWB? That's kind of like a simple acronym that means driving while black. In the state of Missouri, I was part of what was called a coalition against police crimes and repression, and we put pressure on the Missouri state legislature. So they passed a law in the early 2000s, somewhere along there, that they would do a study mandated by the Attorney General to see if black people are disproportionately stopped in this on the streets of Missouri. And you know what? That was a reality. But the craziness about it is every year they say black people are disproportionately stopped by the police forces all across the state of Missouri, yet nothing is done to correct that behavior. So the whole society becomes part and parcel to something that is negatively impacting your fellow brothers and sisters. And last but not least, and I could go on and on, look at the political structure of this country. Our organization, the Universal African Peoples Organization, we advocate that if we want a true society, let me just put this out there, we need to work, and black people have a Constitution convention to rewrite the United States Constitution. I just had to divert because how many of you were aware it wasn't a common day? First of all, no people of color were the framers of the United States Constitution because we were enslaved. No Native Americans were part of that because the land had been taken. No white workers were part of that because it was just the rich landowners of that time that wrote the Constitution. I just put that out there because part of the Constitution ought to have as its platform, there ought to be full employment for everybody. We ought to have full educational opportunities for everybody, free. We ought to have free health care. But that's not going to happen until Occupy St. Louis and Occupy Wall Street and those of you who are the sons and daughters of those who have been historical oppressors of our people make a change. I just want to keep that out there. Politically, in the year 2011, even though many people say black folks have made great strides and they see Obama as that example, if you look politically, statistically, they say by census that we are 13% of the United States population. However, I don't know how many of you are aware that there's over 500,000 elected positions in this country, from school board all the way up to the president. Of that number right now, we only have 2%. Many people say, well, that's your fault. I'm going to address that. Moving on, if you look at the United States Senate today, 2 senators per state. Out of 100 United States senators, not one is black. So we're not even partaking of those people who make those laws that impact us, like those drug laws I spoke earlier, even on the decision making. That's racial oppression. When you look at the governorship, 50 governors, only one of African American descent. We say if America on the highest humanitarian, highest idealistic level, then we ought to have a society that is proportionally represented by all ethnic groups in lawmaking bodies, as well as, finally, coming here locally. I'm one of several people, an organization that's been protesting the St. Louis Public Library renovation, a $60 or $70 million project. A newspaper that was called the Riverview Examiner came there one morning in late August, did a head count of everybody that's going into that job site. When they did the head count, I think they had about 87 heads that they had counted. 97. Of those 97, not one was black. And that should be an outrage for any fair-minded people. And I say that too because black people not getting our fair share of the equal goods, but we have a disproportionate share when of the negativity, like in wars that we shouldn't be fighting. And so you as future leaders, I keep putting that out there in terms of trying to prick your conscience, that if we need to redirect this perpetual war mentality that they got coming from Washington, D.C., dropping bombs all across this world. They're dropping bombs in Pakistan. They're dropping bombs in Yemen. They're dropping bombs in Somalia. They did a complete destruction of Libya. They dropped thousands of bombs in Iraq. That's making people hate this society or this country. And as future leaders, you need to be conscious of that. And they're not looking like stopping. Because now they're talking about Iran. And they talk about this country of Venezuela as if Chavez is a dictator when he was publicly elected. And we have to be careful of this corporate-owned media. And I challenge you, don't believe everything that these corporate media folks say on the news. Most times it's a lie. You have to do your own research. So to that end, I just wanted to lay out those basic concerns for me as a black man here in this country, that when I'm driving down the street sometimes and I see a police car in the back of me, I'm a law-abiding citizen, but I have to get a little paranoid. That's a doggone shame. And most black people here, am I right or wrong?
You're right.
You know, that's just a reality. That's a damn disgrace. You know, and within that context of the wars, we're fighting wars and dying disproportionately in places like Vietnam, when that was a war, you know, at that point. So I'm saying all that to say we have to be careful of these perpetual wars, because companies like Halliburton, Bechtel, all they're doing is creating